Hi, my name is Ella, and guess what time it is? It's cookie time! This year, I'm planning on selling 200 boxes or more. Please help supporting my troop by buying 1 boxes or maybe even 2 if you want to. My troop is planning on going on an exciting trip and helping my community. Please help support me by buying 1 box or more. Bye!
What's up, everyone? Welcome to This Day in Philly Sports History for January 17th, 2025. I'm your host, Jim Montgomery. Welcome to a Feel Good Friday edition, a Divisional Playoff Feel Good Friday, a possible snow game Feel Good Friday. More on that in a minute. But quick housekeeping. You did hear Ella buy the Girl Scout cookies. They're doing good things for her troop. So help support Ella and the Girl Scouts in her troop meet their goals. All the information you need is in the description. I made sure it works. Some of you have already reached out and bought cookies. Thank you. But just follow the link in the description and you are good to go. Then be sure to follow me on social media, Jimbo_Mont on Twitter and TikTok, at Philly Jimbo on Instagram. Subscribe to the YouTube channel, Jimbo_Mont. Let's continue to grow this thing. Spread the word. Likely, if you're enjoying this, someone in your circle will as well. Still, if you haven't checked it out yet, check out my Fan of the Week feature on KYW. That is available through Odyssey.com. Just do a search for KYW News Radio, and the article is under the sports section. Check out our boys over at the On Pattison newsletter. We've been featured in there a couple times throughout the weeks. So go subscribe, and that gets delivered right to your inbox. Some very good takes, some good analysis, and a lot of fun. So go check them out. Let's start, I guess, with a little bit of sad news. Bob Uecker passed away. You might know him better as the play-by-play guy for the Milwaukee Brewers. He also was the announcer from Major League, just a bit outside. Really one of the unsung heroes of that movie. If you're a little bit older like me, you might remember him as the dad on Mr. Belvedere, Miller Lite commercials, but just a great baseball guy. There is a Philly connection there, though. He did spend 2 years in Philly from 1966 and 1967. He was a catcher. He was probably a below-average player, but still a part of Philadelphia sports history. Rest in peace, Bob, and condolences to your family. I did see a quote that he made at one point talking about his time in Philly, and I figured I'd share it because it's hilarious. He said he got pulled over one time while he was playing for the Phillies. He got fined $75 for being intoxicated and $400 for being a part of the Phillies. So that I thought that was just part of what his humor is. But rest in peace, Bob Uecker. You will be missed. All right, let's turn to the Flyers now. Another good win for them, 5-3 over the Islanders. 5 different guys scored goals for them yesterday. Travis Konechny had 3 assists. And now that is 4 straight games for the Flyers with points, as they're maybe doing the opposite of what they did last year, going on a nice little run here, get themselves firmly into the playoff picture. But 5-3, Flyers win over the Islanders up in New York yesterday. Tomorrow they'll be in Jersey to take on the Devils. I got to give a huge shout out and congratulations to my Temple Owls, who knocked off number 18 Memphis yesterday at the Leah Coors Center. First win against a top 25 team in almost 2 years. The crowd was rocking. They had a whiteout game, and it just goes to show what that building could be if they consistently put a good product on the court. So hopefully this is the start of a nice little run under Coach Adam Fisher. But congrats to my Owls for knocking off the Memphis Tigers yesterday and Penny Hardaway, who's their head coach at the Leah Coors Center. Yesterday, we were talking about the Sixers being irrelevant and how they may be in the process of a tank. I did do a little bit more research on that. it's going to be hard for them to get where they need to be to have a legitimate shot for the number one pick, just because Washington is so bad and some of the other teams are just so bad as well. But a key thing to keep in mind is that if the Sixers need to be guaranteed a first-round pick, it needs to be top 6. It is past lottery protected into the top 6. If not, I believe it goes to Oklahoma City. So just something to bear in mind as we struggle through the rest of this Sixers season. Be sure to check out my boys over at the Clashing Conferences podcast, doing great things with their Sports Fan Network. New OG episode for the NFC East is up. Go check that out as they give their predictions for Divisional Playoff Weekend. And then go to Philly Goat, do some shopping. They have all kinds of stuff, disgruntled Sixers related. They have you covered for the Eagles as well. Flyers. Union season is right around the corner. They got some Union gear as well. So go to Philly Goat. Check out everything they have. And one thing I think a lot of times people forget, they have some pretty nice hats too. I saw a couple at the Eagles tailgate last week that were pretty cool. Unfortunately, they did not use that promo code Jim Montgomery, so they paid 10% more. But go to Philly Goat. Check them out. Be sure to use the promo Jim Montgomery, all one word, to take 10% off of your order. All right, let's get into this game against the Rams. I guess the big news yesterday was Kellen Moore is going to be a busy man today and tomorrow. His interview set up with Jacksonville today, I believe, and then the Cowboys and Saints tomorrow. Lots of talk about, is this an issue? And I think ordinarily, it's not an issue when coaches do this. The rule is stupid. They should not be allowed to do that while the teams are still playing. There needs to be something the NFL does to kind of even the playing field somewhat. But I think we have PTSD from what Jonathan Gannon did in the Super Bowl. I don't know one way or the other Kellen Moore's motivation or his focus, but obviously he wants to be a head coach. He actually interviewed here before the Eagles hired Nick Sirianni. But I just don't know from a timing standpoint. At this point, I would hope and think that the game plan is created. The game plan is firmly in place. Fridays are usually a walkthrough day anyway. So I don't know how much of a distraction this is going to be. I think it's crazy to have 3 interviews within a span of probably 24 hours. But we'll see what it is. I don't know how big of an issue this is going to be. And maybe it's more wishful thinking on my part. I don't necessarily see him as a Kellen Moore type. But we'll see. And we'll see really. This is one of those things that Nick Sirianni gets a ton of credit for as far as being the CEO and keeping the guys together and everything. And this falls right into that wheelhouse. So we'll see what happens. I think if the interviews were earlier in the week, I may be a little concerned, like, where is your focus? But by Friday, I would really hope that the entire game plan is 100% in place. I know there's people that say, oh, it's a distraction based on what Jonathan Gannon did, but I think he's just a scumbag and just bold-faced lied to us. I don't think Kellen Moore has said anything one way or the other. It does appear that he's the favorite for the Cowboys job. So, I mean, you can also look at this. I was listening to the radio at the gym, and, I mean, one guy called in, and he was like, hey, this could be a plus for the Eagles. Maybe he's going to try to show what he can do this weekend because likely none of those teams are going to make a decision this weekend unless he goes in and floors them. So maybe it's a chance for him to kind of open up the playbook, say, hey, look what I did with Jalen. We'll see. But let me know your thoughts on that. Like I said, it's not ideal, but I think with the timing and the way it is, at this point, you're just making tweaks to the game plan, and the actual plan itself should be firmly in place. There, you do have the added bonus of the Rams maybe being fired up and saying, hey, let's do this for LA because of the fire. We'll see if they play better. Heard an interview from one of the sports writers from, I think it was a sports writer or a radio host from LA yesterday. He was talking about how that certainly played a role in the game last week against who did they even play? I'm drawing a blank on who the Rams played. The Vikings. So it did play an impact in that, but there was concerns that maybe they used all their juice and all their energy in that game coming east. So we'll see what happens. Fangate continues to get interesting. Apparently, the guy was fired from his job, which again, I mean, it is what it is. But man, like that was a line you shouldn't have crossed. But his apology that he put out, I wanted to talk about that for a minute because it was an apology. But like to me, like an apology is, hey, I messed up. I'm sorry. I got to do better. Blah 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 blah. Move on. An apology is not, hey, I'm sorry for what I said. Definitely doesn't represent blah 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 blah. But I was provoked. No, like that's not an apology. That's you still making excuses. Just own up to it. Like provoked or not, like those words came out of your mouth very, very easily. So maybe that is indicative of who you are when you've had a couple drinks, provoked or not. Now the Packers guy, scumbag, totally got what he wanted. That's what he was looking for. But as fans, you got to be better. I mentioned earlier in the week, I'm not rich. I pay a shitload of money for those Eagles tickets. I mean, damned if some social media influencer or whatever you want to call them, or TikToker, Instagrammer, whatever, is going to provoke me to the point where I'm going to lose my tickets. Yeah, I'll banter back and forth all day, but not necessarily going to call you names. And the fact of the matter is, it's one of the reasons why I won't bring my kids to a regular season game yet. All right, injury news. Goddard missed practice yesterday because he was sick. It was not really announced what the sickness was. Could be a stomach virus. The flu's going around. If you can hear, I'm a little stuffy with what I think is a cold, hopefully a cold. But other than that, I feel fine. So he should be back and should be fine. AJ was limited and does expect to play. But the big question is the weather. Depending on which news source you go to, weather channel you go to, can be anywhere from just a snow shower to 6 inches. So that's a big span. And I know they say, well, the models are not agreeing and you got to wait to see what happens here, which I get, but who knows? It's probably going to snow. It's just a matter of how much, and it could have an impact. We'll see, depending on how much it is. Remember the Snow Bowl from 2013, which ironically enough, Matthew Stafford was the quarterback for the Lions, and he struggled mightily, but still way too early for that. But I'm ready for this game. Like, I am sick and tired of hearing all of the stats and trends that say the Eagles are going to win because, the Rams are going to win because. I just want to get the game on the field. And this is what happens as you advance further into the playoffs. Lots of talk. Everybody has an opinion. But truthfully, I'm ready for just the game to start. I'm sick of hearing the stats. Well, Matthew Stafford only is 1-8 all time in weather, and well, they are a different team now. They're a team of destiny, and who cares? I want to get it out on the field. However, that does lead to today's question of the day, and I'll recap yesterday's here in a minute. What's your biggest concern going into Sunday? Is it the weather, Jalen, Kellen Moore being distracted, or the defense stopping the Rams without Nakobe Dean? 267-495-8531. That's the Back to the Future voice and text line. Hit me up, send me a text, leave a voicemail. Let me know, what are you more concerned about, the weather, Jalen, Kellen Moore, or the defense? I'm kind of more worried about the weather because I think the weather's a great equalizer. And if there is going to be 6 inches of snow and all that, you would think the Eagles get the advantage because of the offensive line and being able to run the ball with Saquon. But it's kind of like that X factor that you never know. And you go back to the Fog Bowl. The Eagles were the better team. The Eagles should have won that game, but the fog changed that. So depends on when it starts, how much it is. To me, it's the weather, but let me know what you think. What are you more concerned about for Sunday's game? The weather, Jalen, Kellen Moore being distracted, or the defense? All right, to recap yesterday's question of the day, though, there is a big game tomorrow that will impact the Eagles' next opponent if they were to beat the Rams, and that is the Commanders and Lions game. Winner of that game goes to the NFC Championship. If it is Washington, NFC Championship game will be in Philly if the Eagles take care of business on Sunday. So I asked you, will you actively root for Washington? Not because you don't want to play Detroit, but because, obviously, you want as many home games as possible. 69% of you said yes, you will actively root for Washington. Those that said no, and it's an interesting point. One of the guys on TikTok commented, he was like, nope, I want to play the Lions because it'll tarnish the Eagles' legacy because people will hold that against us. You didn't play the best team. You didn't do this. And that's a valid point. However, as someone who only has one Super Bowl championship, I don't really care about the legacy of it. I just want the championship. Thinking back to 2008 with the Phillies, does anybody say, well, you played the Tampa Bay Rays? No, Phillies were World Series champion in 2008. Granted, like the story of Super Bowl 52 is great with Nick Foles beating Tom Brady and the Patriots and all that. Doesn't really matter. That's just like icing on the cake. The cake itself is the Super Bowl. So I don't care what the road to the Super Bowl is as long as I get there and I win. However, it is a valid point because there are plenty of folks out there who will take it away and say, well, you didn't play the best team and Minnesota lost and you didn't have to go to Detroit and play. And well, guess what? If Detroit was so good, they would win easily against Washington, which they might. But if they get knocked off by Washington, were they really that good? All the talk about the Vikings getting screwed, winning 14 games and having to go on the road. Well, maybe if you handled your business and won your division, you wouldn't have had to go on the road. And then you saw what happened on the road. Like I would have thought Minnesota would have come out fired up for that game. He played like crap. So it is what it is. I'm a big believer in winning your division matters no matter how shitty the division is, whether or not the team that wins the division has a losing record or not. To me, that means something. And each year is different. Each era is different. But to me, I'm also one of those fantasy football guys that believe head-to-head matchups should matter. Like, I hate when guys are like, well, I'm the highest point scorer in the league, but I catch guys on their best week. Hey, man, it's the luck of the draw. To me, if you are going to have divisions, if you are going to have in fantasy football head-to-head, then it has to count for something. And if you're not going to do divisions in like if you're going to do it, re-rank it, and this, that, and the other, then there shouldn't be any divisions. It should be a more balanced schedule where everybody has an equal sort of schedule on who they play. But it's not like that. There's divisions for a reason. And sometimes a crappy team gets in with a worse record than a team that came in second place in the division. I'm still old enough to remember when there were only 4 playoff teams or 6 playoff teams, whatever it was back in the day, where you had 5 teams. There was 3 division winners and 2 wild cards, and the 2 wild cards played. So it's one of those things where the Eagles have won 10 games in a season and haven't made the playoffs, and a team that had 7-8 wins won their division and made it. Is that fair? I mean, from a record standpoint, no. But to me, win your division. So just a little rant on that. Sorry, I kind of got sidetracked there. But let me know your thoughts, though. Who are you? What are you more worried about on Sunday? The weather, Jalen, Kellen Moore being distracted, or the defense? And then you still want to get your thoughts in on who you're rooting for tomorrow. Let me know that. Shout out to JT Todd from Coatesville who checked in on the Back to the Future voice and text line. He was like, I don't care. Whatever's going to give the Birds the best chance to win, and that is having a home game having the home field advantage. And he said, I kind of like the redemption story against Washington too. So it makes for a good story. But shout out to JT Todd from Coatesville checking in on the Back to the Future voice and text line. All right, today we're going to go back to 1973. And on this day in 1973, the Flyers named Bobby Clarke at 23 years old as their third ever team captain. He took over for Ed Van Impe, and at the time was the youngest captain ever in the history of the NHL. If you're keeping score at home, today Connor McDavid at 19 years, 266 days is the youngest captain ever named for an NHL team. But Bobby Clarke was the leader of the Broad Street Bullies team. Everybody on that team said he was the cog that made that team go. Helped lead them to back-to-back Stanley Cups in 1974 and 1975. He was the captain through 1979. And then he picked up being captain in 1982 again. And I researched this, and I didn't realize this. He was stripped of the he was stripped of being the captain. I can't get that word out. But he was stripped of being the captain because he was an assistant coach. And the rule said you can't be an assistant coach and the captain. So I guess once he became not an assistant coach, that's when he became captains again. But that 72-73 season for the Flyers was a big one. That's the season they earned the nickname the Broad Street Bullies. It was their first winning season in franchise history. And by proxy, they ended up winning their first ever playoff series, but the seeds were planted for the following year for the Flyers to go take the NHL by storm and win the Stanley Cup in back-to-back years. But on this day, it was Bobby Clarke at 23 years old, becoming the youngest captain in the history of the NHL when the Flyers named him as their third ever captain, and it really changed the course of the franchise forever. So Bobby Clarke became captain today in 1973. And then finally today, we're going to continue our forgiveness. And this one is another one of those tough ones. And as we get deeper in the playoffs, they're going to get tougher because we need those good vibes. We need that positive energy. We need to release the negativity out of our bodies. Today, we're going to forgive Gabe Kapler. And Gabe was the Phillies manager only 2 years here in 2018 and 19. He was hired with no managerial experience, basically because he was very prepared and had good people skills. The closest he had come was the director of player development for the Dodgers. Got off to a hot start in year one, but faltered down the stretch as they finished 80 and 82, which was a huge improvement from the year before. Year two was when they signed Bryce Harper. Slightly improved, went 81 and 81, but was relieved of his duties at the end of the season. But Gabe was hated from day one. And I feel like, as weird as this is going to sound, Gabe was too positive for Philly. I talk all the time about new Philly and having a more positive outlook on things. Gabe was just too positive, too optimistic for Philly. But on top of that, it came off very condescending. I feel as though he talked to the media and the fans like they were dumb, like he was the smartest guy in the room, almost like talking down to us. Well, you don't understand what it's like. Things like that. Very conceited and cocky. And then to top it all off, his decisions were horrible. He was 100% analytics by the book without any sense of having a feel for the game. And look, I talk about it a lot. I don't hate analytics, but I do feel there's a time and a place for analytics. If you have a tough decision, that's when you go to the analytics. But you have to have a feel for the game. You got to see what the game flow is, because a lot of times your analytical charts don't take into consideration who's hot, if there's an injury, sort of what's happening on the other side of the field, the weather, things like that. So I think you have to have analytics, but you need to have a feel for the game. Gabe had zero feel for the game, and it started right from the beginning with him when he pulled Aaron Nola out after 68 pitches and a 5-0 lead down in Atlanta, and then the bullpen exploded, which they had a horrible bullpen, but he pulled him because the analytics suggested the third time through the lineup would be bad. Well, how'd that work out for you, Gabe? It did lead to the hiring of Joe Girardi, which led us to having Rob Thompson, which did lead to that current run that we're on now. But today, for the sake of the Eagles, for the sake of our Philadelphia sports team, and for the sake of being the bigger person, I'm going to forgive Gabe Kapler. Now, there's a caveat here. I'm going to forgive him, but just because you forgive somebody doesn't mean you have to like them. I still don't like Gabe Kapler. Just like the other day when we forgave Ben Simmons, I don't like Ben Simmons. But I am going to forgive Gabe. I'm going to forgive him for treating us like children, talking to us like we were the dumbest people ever in the history of sports. I'm going to forgive him for his analytical decisions, which were ridiculous and really cost the Phillies had decent teams that could have maybe competed, but he cost us a lot of games. Yes, he was good at reviewing plays and having plays overturned with replay, but a lot of those games, because of his analytics, the Phillies could have been on a longer run than what they are. But Gabe, I do forgive you for that. I forgive you for your stupid positivity. I forgive you for your stupid face. I forgive you for those 2 years. I forgive you for basically trying to make Bryce Harper do things he didn't want to do. Basically for your entire tenure here. I don't like you, but for the sake of our teams, I forgive you. It worked out good for the Phillies. Believe it or not, I do feel better after all that. But Gabe Kapler, that is who we're forgiving today. On this day in 1973, Flyers named Bobby Clarke captain of the team. At 23 years old, he became the youngest captain in the history of the NHL. And ultimately it paid off in dividends for them as they won back-to-back Stanley Cups the following 2 seasons. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on what worries you most about Sunday. Is it the weather, Jalen's play, Kellen Moore being distracted, or the defense without Nakobe Dean? We'll have more on the game tomorrow as we get ready. 3 keys to the game on Sunday. We'll be anxiously waiting for the official weather forecast. Like I said, we can get anywhere from a dusting to 6 inches. Who knows? Nobody knows. The weathermen don't know. I don't know. Make your weather predictions, whatever. You can't be more off than what the weatherman is. Be sure to buy your cookies too. The link is in the description. Buy your cookies and support Ella's Girl Scout troop. This has been This Day in Philly Sports History for January 17th, 2025. My name is Jim Montgomery. Go have yourselves a feel-good Friday, and until next time, I'll see you when I see you.